Hi, this is Deborah May. You may remember me from my performances on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and you are listening to Trek Untold.
Welcome back to Trek Untold, a Star Trek-inspired podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. It's not often that one has the chance to talk to a beauty pageant queen, let alone one who went on to appear twice in Star Trek. But that's who we're chatting with today because our guest is Deborah May. Deborah, or as she was known in the beauty pageant circuit as Debbie May, appeared twice in Star Trek. The first time was the Deep Space Nine episode Sanctuary from Season 2. And I gotta tell you, that episode is one of the most haunting episodes of DS9. And we're talking about a show that's had plenty of things that really stuck with you. When I think about Deep Space Nine, I think about the Dominion War and all the big ship battles, and so many great episodes like In the Pale Moonlight or The Visitor, but there's so many others that are just as good and are really overshadowed by some of those other big ones I just mentioned. I think a lot about this episode, Sanctuary, and while I do call it one of my favorites, it's also a tough one to think about because it's just so grim, so uncomfortable, and perhaps it's so real that it just takes a lot of my energy to watch it. But it's such a really strong episode that demands a rewatch, especially before listening to this week's episode. She appeared a few years later in the third season Voyager episode, Favorite Son, where she played Lyris, the matriarch of an alien society that Harry Kim may or may not be a part of. It's a much more lighthearted episode by comparison, and a fun one for Garrett Wang, who has the honor of being around a lot of lovely ladies who all want a piece of his sumptuous life force. Beyond Trek, Deborah's had a long career in soap operas and dramas, including Guiding Light, Saint Elsewhere, ER, Murder One, LA Law, Days of Our Lives, and plenty of other shows, as well as sitcoms like Murphy Brown, The Larry Sanders Show, Seinfeld, Grounded for Life, and Malcolm in the Middle, just to name a handful. But most recently, you may remember her as Natanya on The Walking Dead, and I'm sure by the end of this episode, you're going to want to revisit some of her work beyond Trek. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to remind you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Trek Untold. One word, no spaces. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. If you're already following us or offering your support in any way, thank you for your help. Most of all, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a rating and review wherever it is that you're listening to it. This helps more people find us and hear the show. And I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired products for toys and people, but you're going to hear more about them a little bit later. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file.
Affirmative. Initiating program.
Welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining us on the other side of the line, Deborah May. Deborah, how's it going today?
It's going very well in these strange, surreal times. A little Star Trekian, like I remember.
Yeah, I would say so. It reminds me of a few episodes, but that's a whole other episode entirely. But you yourself have appeared in 2 episodes of Star Trek, but of course you've done so much other things besides that. We're going to talk about a few of those things. But again, because this is a Star Trek-centric show, I have to ask the question I ask all of our guests when they first appear, and that's, what is your earliest memory of Star Trek?
Oh, wow. Well, certainly with William Shatner, I believe. He was the original on Star Trek, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And I remember watching it and looking forward to it. Before you could tape things and then watch them in a row, so we'd have to wait every week, and that was always a drag.
Now, you grew up in Indiana, correct?
That's correct, right in the heartland of Indiana, midway between Chicago and Indianapolis, 100 miles on either side, and nearest to Lafayette, Indiana, where Purdue University is, although I went to Indiana University. And it's a town of 1,000 people, a town called Remington.
So tell us a little bit about growing up there. Who were your parents? What did they do? And what led you towards, not acting just yet, but I guess initially towards modeling?
Well, my father, Hollis E. May, the E was for Earhart. His mother loved Amelia Earhart, and so she wanted to name her son Earhart, and he got Hollis instead. So we're grateful for that. And he married my mother, Angeline. Her maiden name was Gutwein. Her family was from Germany. And my father's family was several generations right there in Indiana. My mom was born in the United States, but her parents were not. They were born in Germany. And I am one of 4 children. I had an older brother whom unfortunately I lost way too early. My brother Jeffrey, and then my older sister Angela, and then my little sister Stephanie, who lives in Switzerland with her husband, who's a doctor. But they come here to Florida twice a year, where they have a home, and they're there right now. As a matter of fact, I wonder if they'll get back in May to Switzerland. We'll see. But it was a great place to grow up. And because it was so small, if you wanted to excel in anything and you tried, you could almost always be put in the limelight. And we were all very musical, Matthew and my family. We all sang and played the piano. My brother had by far the best voice. My sister's an opera singer. As I said, she's in Switzerland, and she teaches quite a bit now. And so I was in talent shows and beauty pageants growing up. I enjoyed that because I liked performing so much. Let's see, when I went to Indiana University, I wanted to go into pre-med. I decided that I was destined to be a doctor, which is kind of, I don't know how much time we have. I may go in far too much depth, so stop me if I get carried away. But
we got plenty of time. The more the better.
Oh, good. I wanted to be a surgeon, and I thought, well, they call the area where you operate, it's like an amphitheater. And so it sort of made sense. Well, I lasted a year in music and as my minor, and zoology as my major at Indiana University. I then became Miss Indiana University and went to the Miss Indiana pageant, where I was, I won both preliminaries in swimsuit and talent. So I thought, well, this is going to be great. And then I came in runner-up that first year. The second year, my dad, who was always encouraging me, he had me get my pilot's license when I was 17, and so he encouraged me to go back to the Miss Indiana pageant, which I did, and the same scenario exactly. I won my preliminary in swimsuit and talent, and I was runner-up the second year. Then he found another contest for me to be in. I was in a contest basically for all the losers, the runners-up. It was called the Miss Sweetheart Corn Festival somewhere in Illinois. I did that. I was the runner-up there, and Miss Congeniality. And then my father found another pageant for me to be in. You can see how I was spending my time. And we flew to all these places in his Piper. It was a low-wing single-engine aircraft, and so I got a lot of flight time in. And so he found another pageant for me to be in. It was called the Miss International Banana Princess pageant. It was sponsored by Colonel Tom Parker, who discovered way back when Elvis Presley. So I went to that pageant, and I actually won that one. And they sent me to Ecuador as a goodwill ambassador for Cabana Fruits. And mercifully, I didn't have to carry a bunch of bananas around, because the other gal that was there with me, the Pearl of the Pacific, she had to throw bananas off her float. And so that was an interesting trip to fly to Ecuador. We didn't fly the small plane there. I took a commercial airline there. And then came back, and I was in the Miss America pageant the next year, because I went back to Miss Indiana as Miss Indianapolis. And my mother wanted me to stop all this nonsense, but my dad was just convinced that I was going to win. So I think they finally thought, oh gosh, she's only 20 years old. She can do this till she's 28. We might as well give it to her. So I won Miss Indiana. I went to the Miss America pageant. I was Grand Talent winner, which is another way of saying you were the most talented of the people who were not part of the finalists. But I got great scholarship money from that, and I enjoyed being Miss Indiana. And I drove new cars all over the state, and the finest by roads and back roads that Indiana has to offer. And then I went to San Francisco to visit my older sister Angela, who'd moved there, and I found out about the American Conservatory Theater. And so on a whim, I auditioned for it. I had been student teaching as part of getting my degree, and so I had several monologues that I could rely on, and so I did that, and I got in the conservatory. And the Miss America pageant scholarship money was what paid for all of that. That was a big help, that and the money I had made doing special appearances in Indiana. So I did that for a year, and then I was on my way to New York to do musicals. That's what I decided I wanted to do. And William Ball, who was the creator and artistic director at ACT in San Francisco, asked me to be a member of the company. So I did, and I stayed there for 7 seasons, I believe. Then I went to New York. In the meantime, I'd done theater up and down the coast at Pacific Conservatory Performing Arts and the Old Globe Theater in San Diego. And I went to New York and was on the Guiding Light and did some television shows. And I'm getting my way back to Star Trek, but it takes, if I do the whole story, I'll be here for 4 hours. But I was able to come back to California, to the Old Globe Theater, and I auditioned for and was cast in a play called As You Like It. And the young man playing opposite me as Orlando turned out to be George DeLoyo. So that worked very well. We got married 47 times on stage as Rosalind and Orlando. And then I went back to New York, back to the soap opera. They made me such a good offer, I couldn't refuse it. And George stayed out here. And then we came back to ACT and we did a play there. And he asked me to marry him the following year. So we did that. So then that puts me in Los Angeles and auditioning for and getting some things, various things in television and film.
So you're now involved in the acting world. I'd like to just ask, at this point, as you're coming up in the world, who would you say has helped or influenced you the most in your acting abilities as your career continued?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, William Ball had a great deal to do with my progression in acting. From ACT, I got such great training, and he continued because it was a conservatory. You were a student and an actor at the same time. So we took classes in ballet and movement and scansion and improv work, and you did things that you normally wouldn't be able to do. Couple that with Donovan Marley's Pacific Conservatory of Performing Arts, which was in Solvang and Santa Maria, California. And there I was an artistic fellow, I guess you'd call me, a guest artist. And I got to do roles there that I never would have been cast in, I don't think, commercially. I could basically play whatever I wanted, from Hedda Gabler to the unthinkable Molly Brown. And we opened the theater in Solvang, California in the mid to late 70s, I believe it was. And so that was a great experience. They were very influential. Also, I would say, some of the actors that I worked with at ACT, Peter Donat, whom we lost not very long ago, and I knew Rene Auberjonois, whom I've also lost his friendship recently. And watching them and working in that close proximity was very beneficial. I had a wonderful agent when I went to New York. His name was Milt Goldman, yes, and with ICM, and he introduced me to terrific actors and agents, and was a great. He was a conveyor of my talents, if you will. And then there's Jack O'Brien at the Old Globe Theater, and Sweet Craig Knoll of the Old Globe Theater. He was the artistic director, and then Jack succeeded him. They all played a very important part in my education. And then I've had so many wonderful directors, from Mr. Jackson from Milwaukee Rep to Jack and Bill, and Alan Fletcher was a fantastic director. All these people conspired to help me in many great ways.
So along the way, with all these people giving you these great instructions and feedback, you went on to have a very deep resume of some very acclaimed shows. You've appeared on Falcon Crest, a recurring role in Saint Elsewhere, L.A. Law, Murphy Brown, Days of Our Lives, Remington Steele. I can go on here, but I want to ask you in particular about one role that I thought was a really great display of your abilities, and that was when you appeared with Patty Duke in Call of Anna, which was...
Oh, Call Me Anna, yeah.
Which was an autobiographical made-for-TV movie where you played Ethel Ross, who was one half of Patty Duke's original management team. Can you tell us about that experience of working on that movie?
Yeah. It was with Howard Hessman, I believe. He played my husband, the manager, and I came to really appreciate Patty, or Anna, as she wanted to be called. She's a great talent, great mind, and I was not a very sympathetic character, I have to say. It was pretty awful, allowing things to happen that did happen, but I enjoyed the work very much, and I liked the location of it. It was an experience. I had a baby that I was nursing at the time and had the baby on the set, and I remember all that very well. It was a great experience. I wanted to mention of one more person whom I thought helped me so much when you mentioned St. Elsewhere.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
My husband and I played a married couple on St. Elsewhere, trying to have a baby. And that was the series as it played out. And People magazine came and interviewed us, and we were, in fact, trying to have a baby in real life and on the show concurrently. Well, I got pregnant in real life, and it just blew the storyline completely because she couldn't get pregnant on St. Elsewhere. And I remember Ed, oh God, I can't remember his last name now. My mind's a sieve. But he was such a wonderful actor, so good on St. Elsewhere, and such a good actor at ACT too. I remember working with him in House of Blue Leaves and a couple of other plays. But anyway, that's my memory of Call Me Anna. I enjoyed that very much, and that's been quite a while ago.
Now, there is one other show I want to talk to you about before we jump into Trek, and that's something that our listeners know I'm a big fan of, and that's the Golden Girls. And you were on the episode Before and After. You played one of Rose's new roommates after she left the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love hearing stories about working with all those ladies.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me what it was like working, especially in that case with Betty White, and just being on the set of Golden Girls?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was terrific. And I had a baby with me at that time, and my mother-in-law came from Salt Lake City to watch Alexandra, I think it was. And the ladies all came into my dressing room, and Betty White is one of the most charming, lovable people, and so vital and vivacious. I mean, look at her; she's just remarkable. And I felt like I was in honored company to be with them.
What do you remember most about being on that set?
Mary Wicks, who was at ACT, came to the set. She was friends with all of them, and sat, and I could hear her laughing out in the audience. Yeah, it was just a grand experience. I felt like I had stepped back in time, and I was getting to experience things that marched across decades, and I got to be part of it. Breaking up. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm quite good at holding character, but they are so funny, and they ad-lib quite a lot. Yes, I do remember that. And I remember just before I went on to enter Betty White's apartment, one of the stagehands said, "The ladies have said that you're a very handsome young woman." I just love the fact that they used the word handsome.
That's a very B. Arthur word, I think.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just great voices, great production.
All right, so Deborah, we've come now to 1993, where you make your first appearance in a Star Trek series, and that's in the second season episode of Deep Space Nine, Sanctuary. And I've got to tell you, Deborah, this is actually one of my favorite episodes ever, especially from the early seasons. It's one that's really stuck with me.
Yeah, it stuck on me, too.
So in this
Given
episode...
the makeup.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that for sure. So in this episode, you play Haneek, a Skrean refugee who, as the title implies of this episode, takes sanctuary in Deep Space Nine and ultimately becomes an ambassador for her people who are seeking a new world to move their entire population to. So I'd like to start at the beginning, and can you tell us about how you got cast into this role of Haneek?
Well, I auditioned for it, and if memory serves, which it doesn't always, I think I had to do a callback audition for it. But I guess I just had the stature and the qualities that they felt they needed in this. There was a farming community. We were farmers. We were looking for a place through a deep hole, a black hole, to, as you say, start a new existence, a new life. But I can't remember too much about the audition, except I did get called back, which was unusual. I think they must have been seeing a lot of people. That I'm sure is the case. And so they called back the several that they thought they might use, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen.
So this episode remains a very topical one to this day as it deals with immigration and refugees. It's a very deep, kind of grim also episode. Did you have any thoughts about the script and its political content when you first read it?
Well, I liked particularly that we looked different and that we repulsed people. They didn't want to be around us. We had, if you can, I'm sure you remember, Matthew, you're an expert at this, but we had like scaly skin, and they felt like who knows what diseases I might be getting from that person. Things that we are having to not deal with, but what's going on politically, that idea that people coming from a place other than where you are, they might be something or someone that can contaminate us. We don't know who they are, what they've done or what they've been, so to speak. But I remember putting the makeup on. It took almost 3 hours to get into makeup. And then to get out of the makeup was kind of an arduous task unto itself. You had to stand and have the water course over your face, and it created a balloon of water finally underneath the latex, and it was actually gravel. They used gravel and latex, and then you would peel it down. And you had to be careful because you did begin to think you were suffocating if you're claustrophobic. And I remember one sweet older woman was claustrophobic, and she and I were taking our makeup off in the shower together, the communal shower, and I had to get help for her because she really thought that she was going to drown because it took so long. If I'm not mistaken, it had to soak for like 20 minutes before you peeled it off. So it was one of the harder shows I ever had to do, but I really, really loved it. And I loved the idea of being helped out and finding another civilization, another place to go.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the screens had that very weird, pimply makeup, and it is a little bit repulsive. And I think it's also just a great allegory to the content of the script as well, which is, again, just about what happens when you have these foreign people coming and trying to come into your home, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And I was at a Star Trek convention not too long ago, and interestingly enough, that was a picture that most of the people wanted to have me sign. Haneek.
So can you describe the set of that episode for us and the type of shooting environment that it was? Was it different from other shows that you worked on?
When you're in the set itself, you do feel like you're in a sanctified space, an airship, but it was done on a sound stage, as they all are. So I don't really remember feeling out of place or awkward about it at all. It was extremely efficient, well done, and in a timely fashion. Not all shows are that move that quickly. It moves very quickly, if memory serves me.
Now, this episode was directed by a veteran Star Trek director, Les Landau. Do you remember working with him and the direction he gave you for this character?
Mm-hmm, yes. The only thing I can really remember about Mr. Landau is that he wanted it to be very real and not arch. My character, she had to do a lot of defending, but and she was powerful, but he wanted her that you could see humanity and empathy in her. He was a very good director. I liked him a lot.
And your role as Haneek, I'd like to compliment you. It's a very subtle, nuanced, complex character, and you did a beautiful job portraying her. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So in this episode, you're predominantly paired with scenes with Nana Visitor, and I think you two had some really great chemistry on set.
Nana Visitor,
do what you guys did.
Yes, she's wonderful.
Yeah, how'd you like working with her?
Oh, I loved it. She's a beautiful, beautiful young woman, and really good with her lines. I remember that. I don't think she ever flubbed a line once. I liked working with her very much. I would like to have worked again with her.
Did you find that you guys had a really great back and forth as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. Very much so. I think we had rapport, as we say in the business.
They also mentioned earlier that you had a friendship with Rene, and he plays obviously Odo on Star Trek DS9. So what was it like being able to work alongside him, and him, especially with all that heavy prosthetics that he's wearing for this episode?
Exactly. He's was such a wonderful actor, and I knew Rene and his wife Judith well, and it was just an honor to be on the set with him. I'd seen so much of his work at ACT, and so admired him, and took great comfort in the fact that he was not only friendly, talented, but helpful as well.
Now, when you think about this episode, is there a memory that may stand out the most for you during filming?
The woman almost drowning in the shower is the memory that stands out regarding the episode.
Besides that traumatic experience, because I think now we're all going to be able to not forget that one.
Exactly. I can't say that there was one moment that just, you probably could remember better than I, that just electrified me. I just liked the whole experience shooting of it. It was something that I'd never done before, and I enjoyed the latex and the gravel and the whole look of it.
Now, when this episode first aired, did you actually watch it on TV?
Oh, I think so, yes. Yes, I believe I did, and I was horrified.
Yeah, what horrified you about it?
Oh, how awful I looked. But if the acting's all right, it doesn't matter what you look like.
Yeah, and I think the acting was amazing. When you take a role like this especially, I'm just kind of curious because there is so much nuance to this, and even, and I don't know if you remember, in the first act of the episode, you don't really actually communicate because you're speaking a different language, and you had to communicate non-verbally. So I just like to know, how do you prepare for that kind of role? What do you do to mentally step into this character she's basically a farmer becoming an ambassador?
Yeah.
It's a lot of complex change that happens. What do you do to become that character?
Gee, I think I have a copy of this somewhere. I wish I'd watched it so I could remember better, Matthew. But that's right. You just enlightened me. It was interesting. I was thinking I was very boring and that nothing was happening. And the director assured me that wasn't the case. And as I said, it moved very fluidly and efficiently. So I wasn't left with too much time on my hands to say, God, did that work or did that work well or poorly? And the director was just excellent in saying, we've got exactly what we need, we're moving on. And I just came to trust him completely.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Wrestling is on two levels right now. Either you all in and having a good time with what's going on and enjoying the body slams, headlocks, submissions, and the tope suicidas, or you're just pissed the hell off of what's going on in the wrestling landscape. What kind of wrestling podcast has the same kind of dilemmas? Your guys here at Turnbuckle Tabloid. Jada Santine Olski is here to bring to you the ridiculousness, the buffoonery, the nonsense, and all that is just straight wrestling. We're here with that opinionated New York swag and the ridiculousness that goes along with it. Get us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you can get podcasts. Turnbuckle Tabloid, you don't want to miss it. And we're here every week, unlike some wrestling promotions. Laters.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So 4 years after this appearance on Deep Space Nine, you followed it up with a role on Star Trek Voyager in the Season 3 episode Favorite Son. And there you played Lyris, who is the matriarch of the Teresians, an alien species that has a secret to hide. So what did you think of this role when you first heard this was the character you would be portraying?
Oh, I just thought it was so bizarre. And I had, Matthew, actually tested for the part that my friend Kate Mulgrew took, which was the commander. And I so wanted it, but she was perfect in that part. I thought that the character, I liked the fact that they tried to make me look as good as possible. So that was the opposite of the first character I played. And so I particularly liked that. I liked that. And I liked the notion of this superior female race, well, not a race, but civilization, hardly civilized, needing this quality from men so they could continue on. I thought it was an interesting concept. And I was lucky and glad to do it.
This wouldn't be the last time you played a character like that who's this strong head of a female society, but we're going to come back to that.
Yeah.
Since you brought it up, I would like to ask a little bit more about Kate Mulgrew and auditioning for the role of Captain Janeway, because you mentioned it. I have to ask you right now about this. Can you tell us a little bit about that, like when you were auditioning to initially become Captain Janeway, I guess?
Well, if memory serves me, Matthew, it was a very good audition, and I went back, I think, twice. And they originally gave the part to another woman, and I'm trying to remember who it was. And she didn't do it for very long because she was a film actress, and I could see her face, and she's French, or Kate would know.
Yeah, it's
who
on
it
the tip.
was.
I know the name, but I can't remember it either
You
right
know
now.
who I mean, yeah. And I don't know how many episodes she did, and then Kate was next in line, and I thought she did an excellent job.
So back to Favorite Son now. I heard that this episode had a lot of rewrites to it. Do you remember anything about script changes happening while you were working this part?
Oh, golly. I can't remember specifically a lot of it happening to my character, and I think if it were inundated with script changes, I would remember that, because I do remember some of them, but I don't think that it was overwhelming. At least it didn't bother me, and I'm what we call a quick study, so I kind of like the challenge of having to learn new things in a constricted period of time.
Yeah, I think most of the changes were due to Garrett Wang's character of Kim, so I guess that wouldn't have affected you as
Right.
much, but yeah, that's pretty much what I know, what I've heard from the inside looking in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I remember him. Yeah, he's a very functional character in that storyline, to say the least.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about shooting this episode, because I heard that this one had a really drawn-out shooting schedule because it was happening around the holidays. Do you remember any of that?
I can't say that I remember it being too drawn out. I was enjoying it so much. But because of the script changes and the holidays, they did go over, I think. It was one of the longer shoots I'd been on, yeah.
So this episode was directed by Marvin Rush, who, aside from directing several episodes of other Trek series, was also director of photography on 4 of the different Star Trek series. So I imagine he brought with him kind of a different vision. What do you remember about working with Marvin?
Oh, just that he was extraordinary in the interesting angles that he shot and that he wanted, and he came in so well prepared. He knew what he wanted, and he got it every time. Well, I'm starting to remember all this now. This is great, Matthew. Thank you.
That's good. That's what we want to happen. So we're talking about Marvin, and him being a DP in the past. I imagine he looks at the show differently than, let's say, Lester would have. So from your point of view, was he as focused on the actors as much as he was, let's say, camera angles and setting up scene visually?
If memory serves me, Matthew, he was very focused on the actors through the eye of the camera. He just knew the look he wanted, and I found that DPs who move on into directing are particularly good with actors, because it's like they have an intimacy looking through the lens, and that translates into their direction.
Now, aside from obviously Kate Mulgrew, Tim Russ, and Garrett Wang in this episode, you also shared some screen time with Patrick Fabian, who's gone on to have a major role in Better Call Saul as Howard Hamlin. Do you remember anything about your time on set with him?
I can't quite recall, except we laughed a lot. But it was just such a wonderful ensemble cast.
Was it a very jovial set while it was being filmed?
Yes. As a matter of fact, it was. Yeah, everybody, when you're doing a good show, a great show, and you're part of it, it tends to make everybody just feel better. And it was such a good group of people. We all enjoyed each other's company a lot. I can't say, in all honesty, I've had too many bad situations on sets ever. Either just lucky or kismet, I'm not sure.
Well, it's good to hear, but I am curious if there was a different feeling while you were on Deep Space Nine. I'd heard that set was often a little bit more serious, and especially for the episode that you're doing here, it's a much more serious kind of set.
Yeah, Deep Space over Voyager, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it was earlier too. I think it was much more relaxed. Voyager was more relaxed, a little more relaxed, yeah.
So you also had the luck of being able to work with 2 captains, in Avery Brooks, as you mentioned, and Kate Mulgrew.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say was the biggest differences between those 2 actors?
One was a tall black man, and the other was a tiny little Irish feist sprite.
That's very true.
Say, I would say, gosh, this is tricky. This is hard to say the difference. They both were, commanders of the ship and in solid command. Avery is very off camera, more soft spoken and jovial. I enjoyed my time with him a lot. I really thought I'd love to work with this actor again. And Kate, I knew, and she's very serious about her work and also knows exactly what she wants and usually gets it from her own work and from other people's work as well.
Now, when you filmed this episode, was Kate aware that you were also in the running for her part originally?
Oh, I think I told her, yeah. Yeah, I think I told her.
And what'd she say about that?
Oh, she laughed and she said they should have cast you. Something to that effect. Yeah.
So after your time in Star Trek, you went on to do plenty of other things. You had appearances on the Larry Sanders Show, ER for several years, as well as a spot on the hit HBO miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, which had a lot of other Trek actors in it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask you about one of the more recent shows you've done, and that's The Walking Dead on AMC.
Right.
And in that series, you played Natanya, who is the leader of Oceanside.
Natanya.
You got to do a lot of scenes with Alana Masterson, Sydney Park. So I was just curious, what was it like working on The Walking Dead?
I enjoyed it a lot. For one thing, I didn't have to get all gussied up, and I tried to look better than they wanted me to look, but it was pretty hard because you're living out there, in an apocalyptic time frame. But I liked so much working with Alana. She had a baby at that time, and it was just a good environment, good women to work with, and I enjoyed that part so much. And we were in Peachtree, Alabama. I think it was Alabama, or was it Georgia? I always get it. We flew into Atlanta, Georgia. Peachtree is south, about an hour, 2 hours south. And I would go running every morning or when I had time off. And I remember I was running along an overpass, and some boys on a like a moped or triped, little golf cart sort of thing, came down the pedestrian lane, and I jumped back to get out of their way, and I impaled my leg. I'm looking at the scar now.
Oh, wow.
I impaled my leg on one of the railings, and so I laughingly call this leg the Walking Dead limb.
So I imagine that show is very different from other sets because a lot of it is outdoors and, for lack of a better word, rustic.
It all was. Very rustic, all outdoors. They take great care of you, but you have to go out to where the set is, and it can be quite remote.
Yeah, how did it feel working on such remote sets, especially in this kind of show that is really obviously very creepy, supposed to be very scary, dark kind of show?
Mm-hmm.
How did that reflect in what you did on the episode?
Well, I liked it. I liked the show so much, and of course the makeup is incredible, and you see these guys coming around the corner eating a ham sandwich with all of that. It was startling in that regard. I was just so glad I wasn't a zombie, and I thought, I hope I don't end up as one as well.
And again, coming back to the character you played in Deep Space Nine and also in Voyager, again, these are both like very commanding roles of female characters who are essentially in very female-dominated societies. I find it interesting that you keep getting cast in those roles as we talk about this tonight in this episode.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So for you doing these kinds of roles, how does it feel to be this strong female character, and again, specifically in the Walking Dead universe, this strong female character in a post-apocalyptic universe?
It feels great. It's a thing that I'm drawn to. I'm a tall, blonde woman, and as Bea and Betty said, she's a handsome young woman. And I'm classically trained in the theater and musically as well. So it gives me a chance to use my voice and stage presence. If you're 5'9" and you kind of look a little bit like Marlene Dietrich, used to look anyway. I look forward to parts like that. They're my favorite thing to do. It's good to do all sorts of parts, and passive parts certainly are important, but these are my favorite kinds of parts. Strong, independent women who feel like they're doing something for those that can't do it for themselves.
Yeah, and I have to say, again, you just bring a lot of commanding presence to it, and it feels very real when you take on these roles.
Well, thank you, Matthew. gee, I've got to see each one of these conventions sometime.
Oh, I hope I can get to meet you at one of these too, yeah.
Yeah.
So on that topic of these strong leading ladies, were there any women in your life that you think influenced how you play those characters?
Well, my mother was a very strong woman. She was a housewife and raised 4 children, but she had great depth and faith, and I could say even at times she was opinionated. As far as strong leading women, I know Michael, Peter Donet's first wife, Michael was, she was on the Waltons, if you remember her. And she was, I took some classes with her when I first came to ACT, and she was a lovely woman and very capable of playing those strong, independent women. And I appreciated her work. A dramaturge by the name of Diana Maddox was a big influence in my career. I liked working with her. She taught us scansion and basically how to do Shakespeare. And then Marion Walters was another extraordinary actress that I loved working with at ACT. And she's the one that got me such a wonderful agent at ICM when I first went to New York. She called and introduced me, and she had a great influence on me. Trying to think if there are other. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out that made such an impression on me. If I think of it, I'll let you know.
Now, just one last question about the Walking Dead character that you played.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, this being The Walking Dead, not a lot of folks come out of this in one piece, and your character, unfortunately, well, not so much. So what did you think of the ultimate fate of Natanya and how it all played out?
Well, I was surprised, and I was also surprised that they hadn't even come back to the set for the last one, because I literally had that one shot, no pun intended, and I said, you could just put me in front of a blue screen here in California, but because of the cohesion of the show, they wanted it all to come together. And I remember they had an actress. She was tall like I was, and she was a stunt person, and they wanted her to do the fall. And I said, why? I think I can handle this. I can do this fall. And I had to talk them into letting me do it, because it was just, you got a mistaken identity and you got shot and you went down, and then there was the reveal of who had been shot, which I think was a pretty good effect. Pretty scary.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm now even more impressed with the fact that you just took your own fall as well.
Yeah. It's very funny.
So, Deborah, throughout your career, what do you think was the most valuable acting lesson that you've learned that you can share with our listeners that they can use if they're interested in becoming an actor or an actress?
One, don't take yourself too seriously. In the beginning, I think I did. Advantages and disadvantages come in ebb and flow. And you can let a disappointment, or what you consider is a failure, control and conduct your movement from that time forward, and that's not a good thing. I think one of the best things for me was getting, after I finished college in speech and theater with a minor in music, I transferred out of zoology and went into the theater, mercifully, for all those patients I might have had. But I think when instead of going straight to New York from Indiana, I said, I want to go and get classical training and learn how to do theater like they do in England, for example, because you can go from stage to film. And I think the transition, what you've learned in the theater, will enhance what you can think on camera, because, of course, it's a totally different medium. But I learned how to speak, move, react. I learned so much script-wise in what I studied by going to school first, to a conservatory, and then moving into the theater. That was the greatest lesson for me, and one that I carried forward, and it served me in good stead my entire career.
So, Deborah, my last question for you today is, what is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Oh, I think that it has had such a longevity, and people my age now watched it when they were much younger, and it can continue on. It can evolve and change with the times. And it's also, as you pointed out, the character in Voyager and the character, I should say, Haneek in Deep Space Nine, it points out that there are parallels in life, and we're not all that different. And they can carry a story forward that has resonance today and relevance from back then. And I think that makes it very valuable. And I hope it continues.
I'm sure that it will. Star Trek will, of course, go on and on forever.
Yeah.
And these days now, you're also doing a lot more convention appearances, right? I know, obviously, right now with everything that's happened in the world, you're not. But you've been doing convention appearances also, correct?
Yes, a few of them I have, and I enjoy them very much. As a matter of fact, I sat next to Nicole Tom the last convention I did, and she is, we're cousins, and I didn't realize that she lives just blocks away from me, and she was on the nanny. And so we got reacquainted, and it was so arbitrary and fortuitous.
Oh, that's great to hear. And have you enjoyed meeting all the fans?
Oh, my goodness, yes, and so surprised that they remember. And as you're a devotee, obviously, of this particular theme, and they remind me of things and reliving memories of the work, and I'm so glad that I was a part of it and had a chance to do it.
So, Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been really insightful to hear your thoughts on your Star Trek appearances and everything else. And thank you so much again for just your great work on the series.
Oh, Matthew, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hope there's something in there that you can glean from our conversation, and that it'll be audio worthy.
It totally is. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
So that was our interview with Deborah May, which was a lot of fun. Now, despite my research, we didn't speak too much of her previous work on dramas, just because I wanted to prioritize a few other things in the time we had. But I hope I have another chance to pick her brain sometime and chat a lot more with her about her career. Regarding the script changes we mentioned about Favorite Son, indeed, that episode was originally intended to make Harry Kim an alien permanently, an idea that Garrett Wang liked very much. This would have also meant Garrett would have had to wear those spots permanently for the rest of the series. However, execs didn't like that idea, and it was changed back to being a one-off and ultimately having no bearing on the rest of the series. Likewise, the Deep Space Nine episode of Sanctuary also had a pretty major plot change to it as it was developed. Originally, the Screens were going to be allowed to live and farm on Bajor, but that was later changed to be more of a downbeat ending. I think that ultimately made it a much more impactful episode anyway. Besides, I don't call the show Deep Sad 9 for nothing. So, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show, and if you can, leave a review and rating. We'd appreciate it very much. You can also follow us on social media. Just look for Trek Untold on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know what you think about the show. If you'd like to support this podcast, check out patreon.com/TrekUntold to learn how you can keep our ship operating at full power. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, and shout out to Scott Ray for setting up this interview. If you'd like to book this week's guest for a convention appearance or an autograph signing event or anything else, you can email Scott at scottray67@aol.com. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.